little rows, and you can actually see that as, or feel that as, the texture of the wood afterwards, whereas this is certainly looking a lot smoother, almost like ironing clothes would do. What I'm trying to do, I think, is blend this into this area just around here, so there's not such a sharp transition, and then leave that and move on to another area. Otherwise I'll get bored with doing this. And if I get bored with doing it, I'm likely to make a silly mistake like turn the heat up. Doesn't look too bad. So let's do this area around here behind the window. Now then, there's a very fine dark line just down the edge of there, so what I'm going to do actually is use the other tool to do that with, because it will give me a slightly thicker edge. Go to the spoon shader, again using it upside down almost, but the spoon shader has a thicker edge than that flat shader that I've been using. So all I'm doing is just, well, it's just sketching this in, just like using a pencil. But it's quite a light touch. I'm not actually trying to cut into the wood, which would be fairly easy, and it is one thing you can use these tools for, is actually cutting. Although you probably use more of a knife-shaped blade, and they are often used for cutting things like mylar, for example. For use in stencils. And just under the top there is a very slight shadow because the top overlaps, roof overlaps the side of the loco. So just whilst I've got this tool in here, I know this gives me a nice edge that I can work with. Need to just probably take that into there a little bit, just to blend it together. Now this really, like most paintings I guess, or many artwork, is just a rough level of filling in, and then a lot more details will come after it as I go back over again and again, filling in more details each time, which is why I have to be a little bit careful not to go too dark to start with, because your details are filled in with dark in this particular case. If you go too dark to start with, then you have nowhere to go. Okay. Now I've got a very slight, I mentioned this is a dark edge, and I want to retain that dark edge because it gives it a slight 3D look, which is what's happened here. It's the edge of the window, which is a cutout in the side of the locomotive. So as it's slightly darker, that will make it look as though it's turned the corner, which of course is what it really does in real life. But I don't want to be too far away from the shade of the side where I fill against it, because it will actually look odd. Just coming across here is a soft part of the particles of wood with which this hardboard's been made, and it's giving me a darker vertical line. Again, not so bad. I can treat it like a reflection, but it does make it harder to get a consistent, smooth colour all the way across. When I come to actually try and replicate the reflection, what I probably will do is, it won't show any detail of the reflection, but what it'll maybe do is just show, for example, a vague outline of a building or a vague outline of a car, something like that, which will just give you a hint of how shiny the object is. Just looking at the tip to see if I'm getting, it seemed to be catching the wood a little bit there, as though it had a rough base. What you do get sometimes, you get a carbon build-up on the bottom of the tools, which mean that they don't actually run as smoothly as they have done previously, and they tend to scratch as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that scratching or erasing is a method that is done by taking the surface off with something like sandpaper or a knife. So if something's scratching, it's effectively erasing as I'm going along, which is not what I'm after. So you do tend to keep your tools clean. What you don't do with them is use sandpaper to clean them, not unless the manufacturer indicates so, because what you get is you get tiny scratches in the base of the tool, which actually is a build point from which carbon can build up, and it then becomes like a vicious circle, and I've just burnt too much there. Ideally, actually, something like a piece of leather is quite good to clean tools like this. It has a slight polishing effect, which is also good, but it does tend to grab any carbon or whatever that's built up on it. Of course, if you're using your tool at very high heats, then you will get a lot of carbon build-up. For some reason I can't quite get the angle on this correct, and therefore you'll be cleaning it quite frequently, but if you're using high heat all the time, as some people do, then using sandpaper or a knife to clean it isn't particularly bad, because you're going to be doing that enough times anyway. So scratching it is not really of a concern in that circumstance. So just rubbing the tool around like this seems to act a bit like a blender. I can understand it doing that, obviously, because we're heating the sap again, which allows us to push it to one side, which is something that I haven't been able to do with any other tool. Something I learnt tonight with this particular shader. It would do this. A spoon shader wouldn't do the same thing. It would have an effect like it, but it would tend to create grooves more than move the sap around. And in fact, just looking at this now, I've been a little bit heavy-handed even with this, because I can see grooves in the wood. But interestingly, this is acting a little bit like an iron and smoothing out some of those grooves. So again, something I've learnt. I'm going to leave this panel out for the moment, because that's a yellow colour in practice and it's a light colour. So what I'll do is come back to it later. Now trying to just darken across the top of here, and it's not taking colour. The way in which hardboard is made is it's almost like a sawdust, which is mixed with glue, or resin type glue, and then squeezed through rollers, which of course squeezes some of the sap out of the wood in places just as it happens to go through. So it kind of doesn't surprise me that this isn't taking colour, because it's the sap which actually is the bit of the wood that takes the colour. Which is a bit annoying, because I'd like that a bit darker. May have to come back and do that with the spoon shader. With it being a more of a bowl shape, I get a more intense point of heat, which may be enough to cause it to darken. Almost as though this has lost heat. Ow! One of the things you get with pens is especially pens that can come off the cord as this one can, you can pull it out, is this join here actually gets hot and this one is quite warm, and that's because there is a small amount of resistance, and it's the resistance that where the heat comes from, which is, that's what this end is here basically. It's a short circuit through a relatively low resistance, which is why the tip heats up, but of course I'm getting a heating effect here as well. The better that join, the cooler it is. And I think don't know, this pen along with the one I was using earlier with this same tip in, they seem to be quite not very good join between the cable and the tool itself. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the control unit and I can see when there's a bad contact, and a bad contact means there's no current flow, and if there's no current flow then you don't get any heat in the tip. One of the things you actually have to watch in using tools like this as well, like this particular shader or more or less any of the shaders, it's not so much a problem with things like the writer tips, is not pressing too hard. Let the heat do the work rather than pressing down. If you press down, what you tend to do is distort the tool, because of course it's warm metal, and warm metal is softer, and it is very easy to bend some of these sometimes when that's not what you intend it to do. Of course sometimes you do want to bend the tool to get just the shape or just the angle that you're after. There's quite a lot of people make a lot of specialist tools for themselves, specialist shapes, especially the ones that are wire-based tools. People make some really wonderful shapes for making all sorts of things. Now what I'm doing here is just coming up to the edge of the panel. On the locomotive, this panel is actually a grill, probably an air intake or something like that for the engine, which is inside. And what I would like to try and do is represent that grill at least a little bit, even if I only hint at it, and it's going to be quite difficult to do, which is going to prove interesting. So what I'm going to do to start with is just outline it so that I've got an edge to work from, and then I'm going to see if I can find or think of a technique where I can represent a grill. Probably what I'm thinking of doing at the moment is giving it a light colour, or lightish sort of colour, and then using a spoon knife, a knife tool, which has got a sharp edge, to actually burn almost dark stripes, if you like, but very close together, so that they create sort of a crosshatch almost effect, which is kind of what I'm looking at in the reference images for these locos. Yeah, from the reference image that's showing like a dirty edge, so just want to darken that down and just bring almost streaks down. Again, that's kind of detail I can do afterwards, but it will actually stay. One of the things you'll find in doing this sort of work is you know, I've made this a bit darker here. I can actually with manipulation make that fade into the background, but equally if I'm just going over it, that always stays a little bit darker. I'm kind of doing both. You might just be able to see it here in that this sort of edge is staying darker than this bit here, and this will do the same. The whole thing just gets darker. I guess if you do any painting digitally, it's a technique of layers which they generally call multiply, and it's that sort of same effect. Now I need to blend with this darker area around here, around these steps, or rather grab rails. I need to just darken this so that it doesn't look out of place. Unfortunately, one of the things about working with a hot tool, pyrography like this, is it's quite warm. especially as I've got a big light on as well, so that you guys can see what it is I'm doing. Well, looking on the reference pictures, there seems to be almost like a sliding door rail or something just under here. Certainly a darker area, so I'm just darkening that down whilst I fill this area in. It's almost a groove in the side. Actually continues a fair little bit down the side of the loco there, but I'll stop there for the moment. Doing some things like this which sometimes can make you a little bit impatient. Whack the heat up and make a mess. Okay, let's see if I can do this area again now. Yeah, nice, it's taking a little bit of heat this time, taking a bit of colour. Probably giving it a rest allowed some sap to seep in from elsewhere. I'm getting colour on it now relatively easily. Which I'm glad about, as it looked odd, it looked rather white. Now then, just down this edge here is a yellow, so what I'm just going to do is just put a red edge or a dark edge just down here. Transition to yellows at about the same height as that, so about there. Now the middle of the loco is actually about there. Yeah, there is actually a seam goes all the way up. It actually continues over the top, almost as though it's made in two halves and joined together. Which it may well be. So I'm going to do. Actually just sketch that line in. The other side here. Sketching the lower edge of the yellow. Now this is actually corrugated, which could be interesting. Let's see if I can replicate that effect. I'll do that. See if I can do that. Now that means a fairly lighter shade here, and then go over it with darker lines for the corrugated panels. That's a really nice pale colour, but I actually need it darker than that. If I can replicate that colour when it comes to doing the yellow panel, that will be really nice. But I'm going to take this darker down. If anybody's watching and wants to say hello, please do so. With any questions, I don't mind trying to answer them. I'm not an expert by any means, just a beginner in pyrography, but I can do my best to answer any questions. Building this up slowly because I want it to be a fairly uniform colour. I don't want any dark spots in it. I can avoid it. But it does mean it'll be a really slow build up of colour. Sharp bit of wood embedded in here. I can feel it catching on the bottom of the tool. Okay, the colour's coming down. Need to go a bit darker still yet. It's so tempting just to rest the tip on here for a period of time and get a dark edge, but I don't want to spoil it.